Facts.
Well, hello, and welcome to the fabulous Friday edition of the Todd Veinotte Show. I'm Dan Olstrand. Hope you're having a fantastic day. It's here. We can see it. It's the end of the week. It's been a big week for many. I know we've talked about it a lot here on the program. It's the back-to-school week. Everybody that has classes available, of course, is back in school. The routines are getting back to normal, and now we have a weekend. Anyway, if your weekends are anything like mine, it kind of takes the whole routine and throws it out the window. But I know that many of you, and I may have already started, just driving in this morning, I was expecting traffic to be a little bit more busy with all of the things happening in September, but it wasn't too bad. It really wasn't too bad at all. Before we go any further, I want to just send my thanks and in eternal gratitude to Vanessa Vandenez, who is a superstar, by the way, absolute superstar behind the glass, keeping the show up and running. Thank you to you, Vanessa. Some movement, speaking of back to school, maybe, in the ongoing labor dispute at Dalhousie. Both sides are to meet with a conciliator on Monday. The Faculty Association is going to rally at noon today, and I know that we've called for it here on the program, and many that are listening to us are hoping that we'll see some kind of movement in that labor dispute so that students can get back to class and teachers can get back to, professors, I guess is the right way to say that, back to class, and things get back to normal at Dalhousie. So we will keep a close eye on those conciliated talks that are scheduled to begin Monday morning here on the program. It was humid this morning, wasn't it? We hit into September and you think, all right, we're done with all this, choking humidity and humidex and all that stuff. But I walked out of my apartment building this morning and walked into it, felt like a warm towel. It just was just sticky. And I don't have that far to walk to the parking lot to pick up my vehicle to come to work, and I was sweating already when I got to my vehicle. So it is a sticky day out there. There are some welcome showers in the forecast today, and perhaps some more heavier rain later Saturday and into Sunday. Nothing to write home about, so to speak, but at least we're going to get some kind of precipitation as we continue to watch that wildfire continue to burn out there in Annapolis County at the Long Lake Fire. Officials yesterday saying that it hadn't grown in size for a couple of days, but without any help from Mother Nature, it's probably going to continue to grow or continue to burn out of control. I know that there's some relief folks that got back to their properties, some folks that are obviously trying to pick up the pieces as well, who lost property as a result of that fire. And our thoughts, as we've been saying all week and will continue to say, go out to everybody impacted by that fire. Well, there's some new numbers out this morning that show maybe that the honeymoon with Mark Carney, the Prime Minister, might be coming to an end. Angus Reid showing Carney's approval down 6 points to 51%. The interesting part, or there's a number of interesting parts in this poll, but one of the interesting nuggets that I dug out was that 40% of voters say that they would vote Conservative. 38% said that they would vote Liberal if the election were held today. That's essentially a statistical tie. Interesting to see how the polls are impacted by the news that Mr. Poilievre has been returned to his seat in the House of Commons, is going to be able to face off against Mark Carney when they get back to work in a couple of weeks at the House of Commons. The other interesting nugget that I found in this survey by Angus Reid was that Pierre Poilievre's favorability rating is 36%. It's really low compared to Mark Carney, who's at 58%. We'll be watching those numbers very closely as we get back to the House of Commons and Mr. Poilievre and Mr. Carney face off, if those numbers fluctuate anywhere. And, of course, Conservative Party watchers are keeping their eyes on the calendar as Mr. Poilievre will face that leadership review coming up in, I think it's January, and will have his leadership tested. And I put quotations around that. There's some concern that maybe this leadership convention or this leadership test is a bit of a formality rather than anything else, but we will keep an eye on the poll numbers. Also, don't forget that Tim Powers will be here, and we'll talk about those numbers and the goings-on in Ottawa this week. And can we call it the bottle dumping gate that Premier Doug Ford kicked off this week when he dumped a bottle of Crown Royal whiskey onto the ground after word that they were going to close a bottling plant in Ontario? Political stunts normally are just that, but this one seems to be getting a little bit of traction. Anyway, we'll talk to Tim about that as part of the program. Today is, of course, Friday, and as is the tradition here on the program, started back by the fella who used to sit in this chair and for whom the studio is named after, Rick Howe. We will open up the open hour to you. There's a lot of things to chat about this week, my goodness. In Nova Scotia Power rate hikes, the affordability crisis. I got a couple of really good emails on that yesterday after our discussion. Mayor Fillmore's code of conduct investigation, the temporary foreign workers program. I know some of you have sent me emails about that and about Mr. Poilievre's plan to get rid of that. Not maybe sitting as well as one would have thought here in Atlantic Canada. With a number of organizations already crying foul about having that program gone. We're going to dig into that a little bit later in the program today. We call it the Friday Free-for-All, and that's exactly what it is. Make sure that you call early to avoid disappointment, and I look forward to it, and that's going to happen right after 11 o'clock today. Very quickly, before we move on into the program today, I don't know if you watched this last night, but I certainly did, at least the first bit before I had to go to bed. The NFL kicked off its season last night, and I've been trying to give it a fair shake. And I will say that I have been an NFL fan for most of my life, from very young right through until today. But I'm having more and more struggles with the NFL and, by extension, professional sports. And there was an incident last night at the kickoff to the NFL season that really is one of the reasons why maybe I'm not as much of a fanatic as I might have been in the past. Multi-million-dollar athletes acting like children. What are you talking about, Dan? Well, did you see the kickoff last night? Jalen Carter from the Philadelphia Eagles spit on Dak Prescott, the quarterback of the Dallas Cowboys, before the game kicked off. Now, the officials on the field ejecting Carter before the game. Do you know that he makes $31 million a year? Jalen Carter does. He got a contract extension or a renegotiation. I think it's 31.5. Anyway, the numbers are just mind-boggling. And let's not forget, Dak Prescott is one of the highest-paid players in the NFL, so he's north of $50 million a year. Now, there's been some discussion that, well, maybe Prescott was the first one to spit in somebody's direction. But anyway, like, what? If this happened on a football field here this weekend in Halifax at a high school game, right? Those athletes, they're done. Like, you're done. What's going to happen to this $31 million a year athlete? Yeah, he got kicked out of the game last night. He will face, obviously, disciplinary. He'll probably get a $50,000, $100,000 fine. For somebody that makes $31 million a year, that's what you and I spend tipping our delivery drivers. Right? And then he'll be back and it'll be normal and everybody will just kind of forget about it. Kids watch this stuff, right? They pick up on professional athletes and their behavior. And I hesitate to say that they're role models, but they are. I mean, I can remember being a youngster and looking up to football players and baseball players and hockey players and thinking, I really want to be like him. So when you see this kind of behavior and everybody kind of, oh, did you see he spit on him? it's awful. And it just and the consequences for an athlete that gets caught doing something like this and such are meaningless, to be honest. Unless the NFL comes down, and I would be very shocked if they do, comes down really hard on him and there's a lengthy suspension and those kind of things, which I highly doubt. It'll be a fine, and then we'll be talking about how wonderful a player he is next week. That might be something you want to talk about in the open hour today as well. Cecil will be here in hour number 3. We'll ask him about that. And, of course, the big, I can't say it enough, big series this weekend kicks off tonight. The Toronto Blue Jays are in New York to face the Yankees, and there is all kinds of sports analogies that you can put in front of this series. The Jays holding, I think it's a 3.5-game lead. I haven't checked this morning because they were off last night, but they're 3 or 3.5 games up on the New York Yankees. If the Blue Jays are able to win this series, if the Blue Jays, can you imagine, were able to sweep this series, I think with the date on the calendar, we could put the Yankees out to pasture, at least for the first bit of the playoffs, and only be concerned about the Red Sox. That would be fantastic. The Blue Jays are having an outstanding season. The buzz is starting to build, and you will be able to listen to all of those games right here on 95.7 News Radio. And if you haven't listened to a game on the radio, it's a completely different experience. Sitting on your deck, listening, having the radio there, listening to the call of the game, and or in your backyard or wherever. It's a completely different experience than watching it on television. We're going to stop and take our very first break here on the program. When we get back, Nova Scotia's Power's rate hike, 4.1 next year, 4.1 the year after that. If you do the math, it ends up being 8.3% and change. What does that mean? We've talked about it from perspective of residential rate hike. We've talked about it with the CFIB yesterday. Time to bring in the Canadian Taxpayers Federation to get their take on this. Nova Scotia Power rate hikes and taxpayers. Devin Drover, the Atlantic Director and General Counsel of the Canadian Taxpayers Federation, will be your guest. Happy Friday. You're listening to the Todd Veinotte Show. I'm Dan Ulstrand. We're back in minutes. 4.1%. The next year, 4.1% in 27. That was the words from Nova Scotia Power earlier this week as they lay out their plans for rate hikes in the next couple of years. Of course, not many people were very happy about hearing those numbers. Not many people would like any kind of rate increase given the track record that Nova Scotia Power has had as of late with a cybersecurity breach and so on and so forth. We're continuing our look at the potential for this. Of course, this still has to go before the whatever the new incarnation of the UARB is, and maybe, I say with a smile, the review board will turn it down. Very pleased to welcome to the program the Atlantic Director and General Counsel for the Canadian Taxpayers Federation. He is Devin Drover, and he joins me on the phone. Devin, how are you?
I'm great. Thank you so much for having me.
I guess first brush, 4.1 next year, 4.1 on top of that the year after. Your thoughts on that from the Taxpayers Federation perspective?
I mean, let's be blunt. It's completely unacceptable. Nova Scotians are already struggling with the cost of living, and now Nova Scotia Power wants to pile on even higher bills. It's not appropriate. It's not acceptable and needs to be struck down as soon as possible.
Now, the Premier has said that Nova Scotia Power is out of touch. Didn't really lay out much of an action plan for him moving forward, at least not yet. What can and what should the Premier do here?
So I think first off, credit where credit due. He's absolutely right to say this is the wrong time for a rate hike. And if you look at some of his priorities this year with the spring budget, for example, we saw him trying to make life a little more affordable for taxpayers in terms of the HST cut and some income tax adjustments. that's essentially going to be eroded for taxpayers if this rate hike goes through. We're going to see, the savings that a family would make from a reduction in HST or income tax adjustments is going to go away because they're just going to have to pay higher power bills. So, credit where credit's due on speaking out about it. But of course, words aren't enough. We'll see what the regulator wants to do. But if they won't protect ratepayers, then I think the Premier needs to be ready to step in, exploring some political intervention to stop this hike.
Devin, we know that Nova Scotia Power is a private company, right? It's at arm's length of government, not even arm's length. It's a private entity. Some questions being raised about what exactly that the provincial government can do here. Does this maybe open the door, and is this maybe something we should look at? This private utility situation, this private utility setup that we have now, maybe isn't working for Nova Scotians?
Yeah, so I think we have a monopoly. There's a monopoly in Nova Scotia for power, but at the same time, it's failed to deliver reliable service. I mean, you mentioned in your opening there the cybersecurity breach. It doesn't take much of a way of a storm to hit Nova Scotia to see power going out almost every time. Bills keep climbing, and yes, they're continuing. They're bringing in profits every year. So. I think instead of asking hardworking Nova Scotians to pay more, Nova Scotia Power should be tightening its own belt, maybe finding out how to do things a bit more efficient on their own end, or government has to consider whether or not this monopoly arrangement is going to continue to work.
Breaking a monopoly would be very difficult, though, wouldn't it? We'd have to essentially have another company come in.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's not something that can happen overnight, but it is something I think worth exploring. Especially as Nova Scotia government looks at other forms of development. I think it should certainly be on the agenda.
The 4.1% next year, and 2027 obviously still has to be approved. The UERB, or whatever it's called now, it's changed its name again, but the regulator seems to have an awful lot of control over these kind of files, Devin, and I'm wondering what your thoughts are and what the Taxpayers Federation is opinion of having a board like the UERB with all kinds of power that it's unelected, right? It has the actual voter doesn't have much say in the makeup of that board.
Yeah, so it becomes a bit complicated because in one end, obviously, I think from a taxpayer perspective, they want to see this scrapped as soon as possible. However, they have to rely on, as you say, unelected and appointed individuals. So, I think there's two things, I think, from a taxpayer perspective that could come out of this conversation. And one, it is seeing the board or the regulator step in and oppose this increase. But I think on the other end, I think there needs to be some proposals or some thought given about making it more accountable to the people that pay for the regulator or pay for the province to operate, and that may look at the kind of the nomination of members to the board or to the regulator.
You mentioned earlier that this increase would essentially wipe out all of the breaks that we've received since the Houston government took over its latest mandate, and I'm thinking bridge tolls and the HST reduction. This is going to end up wiping all that stuff out.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, for the average family, these type of increases will mean hundreds of dollars more in electricity costs every year. If you look at proposals like the HST cut, I think the average family was about $300 in savings. So that basically gets wiped out, after a month or say 2 or 3 months in with the rate increase. And then you look at some of those other savings. It's basically going to start moving Nova Scotians in the other way. So. I mean, of course, we'd welcome more tax relief from the Houston government, and, it's interesting to see what's on their agenda for next year. But, it's very concerning from a taxpayer perspective to see these kind of hikes, these type of rate hikes basically working against the work that the Premier is doing in cutting taxes for Nova Scotians.
Devin, we know that the Nova Scotia government is going to reopen the legislature here at the end of the month. It's been a while, I will say, and we're really even not sure how long of a session this is going to be. Nova Scotia's traditions tend to have shorter than normal sessions, I will say. Do you think that this should be at the top of the agenda, or what should be at the top of the agenda when the government returns to the legislature? Yeah,
I think this absolutely has to be a priority for the government. I think there's There's been a lot of moving pieces with the fiscal circumstances the province is facing in terms of, government debt in the province. There's some issues with taxation. We've seen some reductions. I think a lot of Nova Scotians would like to see further cuts, but I think this issue has to be the priority right now, just until, Nova Scotians have some certainty on what's going to happen here.
Devin, appreciate your time.
Thanks so much for having me.
That is Devin Drover from the Canadian Taxpayers Federation. Don't know if you heard this in the news. It just kind of broke over the last half hour or so. Stats Canada has released its unemployment data, and it showed the unemployment rate has ticked up to 7.1% in August. The economy lost 66,000 jobs for the month. The report follows the July labor force survey that showed a loss of 41,000 jobs and an unemployment rate at 6.9%. This isn't going to be good news for the Carney government. Poll of economists heading to the release had expected August to show a gain of 10,000 jobs and an unemployment rate rise to 7%, according to Data and Analytics, SLEG. Stats Canada says there were 60,000 part-time jobs lost in August, and then the economy shed an additional 6,000 full-time jobs. Employment falling across several industries, professional, scientific, technical services industry, losing 26,000 jobs. It's not all service industry jobs. It's not all those summer jobs that come to an end at the end of August when we end the quote-unquote summer, when we see everybody kind of start to roll or wind down the summer tourist operations. These are 12-month-a-year jobs. Well, transportation and warehousing losing 23,000 jobs. Construction employment, though, which I think you shouldn't be too shocked about, saw an increase of about 17,000 jobs across Canada. Just take a look around here and the cranes and the work sites and the buildings that are going up. Jobs report comes ahead of the Bank of Canada next interest rate decision, which is set for September 17th. So this, as I mentioned earlier, will not be good news for the Carney government. The economy losing 66,000 jobs. I know that Mr. Poilievre was speaking on jobs and immigration yesterday, saying that he's going to eliminate or would eliminate the foreign workers program, saying that it's robbing our youth of employment opportunities. And these numbers are certainly going to back him on that, with a number of part-time jobs being shed, 60,000 being shed. And I don't think that A equates to B when it comes to the temporary foreign workers program, but I think that it will certainly put more air into his argument with regards to the part-time job numbers here in the province, or in the country. But that is not good news, folks. 66,000 jobs lost in Canada in August. Unemployment now up to 7.1% in Canada. Something that we will open and discuss with Tim Powers when we come back from the break. That and the polling numbers. Mark Carney, the honeymoon apparently is starting to end. Is the bloom of the rose coming off of the Carney Liberal government? 6-point slide in the latest poll from Angus Reid. That and a whole bunch more coming up when we chat with Tim Powers with our weekly chat on what's going on in Ottawa here on the program. We're going to stop. Blake's going to update us on what's going on in the news. Then we will continue the show. It's Friday. Hope you're having a fantastic day. We're back after the break. Welcome back to the fabulous Friday edition of the Todd Veinotte Show. I'm Dan Aalders. There are a lot of things going on in Ottawa. Well, there usually are. We're getting some more information about Canadians' likes and dislikes of the current government, and we've got some rather alarming numbers, I think, from Stats Canada today with regards to unemployment and job losses in the country. Very pleased to welcome to the program in his traditional 10:30 slots our good friend from Abacus Data and Summa Strategies, and that is Tim Powers. Tim, did you watch the game last night?
The Eagles and the Cowboys. No, I was actually watching the Dodgers and Padres and watching Skeens go against Hida. Geez, sure. Number 17. My God, I can't even remember his name now. The Japanese phenom.
Ohtani.
I was watching.
Shohei Ohtani.
Shohei Ohtani. Sorry. There you go. I should know that because my son thinks he's Shohei Ohtani most days. So, yeah, no, I did not. Who won, Dan? Who won between the Eagles and the
Eagles won. I think it was they won by 4. They didn't cover the spread, but the big story that came out of it, Tim, was that one of the Eagles spit on Dak Prescott before the start of the game. And it's Jalen Carter, I think, I think he makes $31 million a year, spitting on a $60 million a year player. Doesn't it just kind of put an exclamation point on what is the ills with professional sports these days?
Well, I don't know about all professional sports, but the NFL is unique in the way sometimes humans behave in that league. Whether they're convicted of felonies or not, the NFL kind of leads the league and all of that. But Dan, I have to say this. I now know why Todd is taking this time off, because apparently is it Amazon Prime? There's a whole series on the New York Jets. I mean, he's just got to have every minute of every day to watch that and rewatch that and live in some delusion that Joe Namath will reappear and he'll guarantee a Super Bowl win.
Yeah. Well, it's always there's always that pinch of optimism at the beginning of a season for teams like the Jets or like my Browns, who just kind of.
Oh my God! Oh, Dan! Oh,
yeah, I know. But
what
Tim,
is it with guys
Tim,
who host Halifax radio shows? I mean, what is going on?
Those that live in glass houses, Mr. Patriot fan. I don't know what's going to be happening there this year.
But I just want to say. The number, what is it? 6 Super Bowls? 6 Super Bowls? That's okay. How many of those Browns have? Oh, sorry, can't remember. Right. Okay, Dan, what do you want to talk about?
Well, let's get into what we I don't even know how to segue from that, to be honest. Anyway, I guess the breaking news this morning, StatsCan releasing jobs numbers showing 66,000 jobs lost in unemployment, now up to 7.1%. Does Carney wear this, or is this going to be rolled back to the result of U.S. tariffs?
Well, I think when you're the PM, you wear a bit of it, but I think the government of Canada is going to argue that it is as a consequence of what Donald Trump is doing. What's going to be equally fascinating is the U.S. job numbers were not great either. What is Trump going to say? What's Fox News going to say? All of that will be fascinating to watch. But when you're the PM, then you're on the job, and you've been on the job now since March. You have to answer for it. So we'll see. I think he's out later today. What argument government of Canada makes about all of this?
The House of Commons is getting set to reconvene. We know that the Liberal cabinet met for a couple of days in Toronto. We know Mr. Poilievre has been out making announcements. We're going to see them face off, I guess, against each other on the floor of the House of Commons. What do you expect from this session, Tim? Is it going to be blustery, or is it going to be sort of very Mark Carney-ish and businesslike?
Well, I think there's two agendas. I think Mark Carney will want to present himself in that way, because I think that still is working with good number of Canadians as polls continue to show his personal numbers are high. For Pierre Poilievre, I mean, he's focused on January, as we talked about before, Dan. He still needs, even though it would seem to be a safe bet to say he's going to win in January, he still needs to get past his leadership review with flying colors. So, and I think he thinks that involves going as hard as you can at whoever the Liberal leader is, being as high in your critique and pointing to policies that may cause some fear and anxiety in Canadians as vulnerable points that the Liberals are failing them on. So I expect a bit of both. I think you'll see two different types of performances suited to their own needs.
You mentioned Mark Carney's numbers. Angus Reid out with some new data today showing Carney down 6 points in his favorability, but still at like 51%, which any politician would revel in. That being said, is the honeymoon over, or do you think Canadians are are taking a second look at Mr. Carney and thought, this guy's is gonna save the world and hasn't been able to do so yet?
It's a little bit of that, right? People get impatient. We're impatient people by nature, and if we're feeling financially strained and drained, and September is one of those months when people go back to school or get back into their fall routines, and they're more focused on the things that cause them pain than cause them delight, because in the summer we try and escape for all of that. You can expect that there'd be a bit of a drop there. And I think, look, the Trump stuff is dragging on. It's become less center focused for Canadians. If you look at data, they're back to cost of living, even though everything about tariffs essentially is about cost of living. But the government has slipped a little bit in explaining that. We talked about the Abacus stuff, I think, last week that showed that gap between cost of living as a top issue and Trump. So I think there's a vulnerability there for the government too, to find a way to talk to Canadians and show Canadians they're addressing that. I mean, really, Carney is pretty good at being a kleptomaniac and stealing Pierre Poilievre's thunder. I believe I've seen it reported today. I certainly saw it reported last night that the government's probably coming out to change those clean fuel standards, Dan. Right. And you'll remember
carbon tax 2.0. Wasn't that what Poilievre called it?
Exactly, that Pierre Poilievre was calling them. So if Carney moves on that, as is reported, maybe that also helps him a little bit and takes away some of Pierre Poilievre's thunder. Poilievre could chalk that up as a victory, but unless, as Jagmeet Singh discovered, the Liberals will take whatever they can and turn it into their decision and their success, and that's politics. So we'll see what Poilievre comes out next and how the government responds to that. Back to
the Angus Reid data today, Mr. Poilievre's likability rating at 36%. Do you think now that he's got that seat back and that he's going to have a higher profile in the House of Commons, and once he gets past this leadership review in January, do you expect those numbers to improve, or do Canadians really just not like this guy?
Charm isn't his strong suit. Churn and conflict is. So I don't know. Look, I don't know. I think there's a part of Pierre Poilievre that views, and you've heard this before, look, best performance we've had since the inception of the Conservative Party, with the exception of, you might have done well in the popular vote, but you didn't win the election. I think there's still a school of thought that they were caught in a perfect storm, so not much needs to change, and that eventually the worm will turn and anger will focus on Carney and the Liberals, and it'll be his to get. The risk in that is that's not much of a strategy. So it's a long answer to say maybe there's a slight change, but he doesn't seem to be comfortable other than in the skin of somebody who is constantly on the attack. I mean, he's a smart fellow. He's a fellow who in other places has demonstrated some wisdom and compassion. I think there are people who are voting Liberal now who might consider voting Conservative if they saw more of that. And so much of it is also going to depend, too, Dan, on the resurgence of the NDP. And that may also, if there is such a thing, and that may also shape how Poilievre behaves. But right now, no evidence that that charm is going to win out over conflict.
Mr. Poilievre this week is saying that he would eliminate the temporary foreign workers program. Tim, is this and it's almost a bad analogy, low-hanging fruit, but some of the business community here in Nova Scotia, in the rural parts of the province, say that if you get rid of the temporary foreign workers program, it's a business killer.
And they're right. Look, I understand the politics he's trying to play here, but it's a dangerous politics. It belies the reality of a lot of rural Canada, of a lot of look, he said he's going to have a carve out for agriculture. What about aquaculture? What about the fishery? What about other industries? Lots of fish businesses in my province have for years had to rely on temporary foreign workers because there aren't enough local young people in the communities to fill the jobs, and or they don't want the jobs. the service restaurant business, classic example of that in all of our region. And it's not just those businesses. So I think, there's reforms that are needed with the temporary foreign worker program, but the temporary foreign worker program canceled outright is just not smart.
The NDP announcing this week that they are going to start their race to replace Jagmeet Singh. Is there or are there front runners in this? Is there somebody that's kind of rising to the top of the heap when it comes to the next leader of the federal NDP?
Yeah, and that's kind of like watching the Browns play the Jets. Oh, sorry, you had a question there, didn't you? Yeah. Look, this could all change. I think, is it Heather McPherson? Seems to be a bit more well-known. And you're right, the NDP off at your peril, as we certainly know in Atlantic Canada. There's always been some strong pockets, and you had an NDP government there in Halifax where you are with Premier Dexter, but they've got work to do. Mr. Singh, the arrangement they made with the Liberals that kind of really sunk them deeply. Pierre Poilievre, being the Conservative leader, presents a challenge for them too, because you have to imagine that a lot of NDPers would prefer to vote Liberal, regardless of who's leading that party, than put a vote with the NDP if the NDP are going to be limp. So, yeah, it's a tough one. It's a tough one, and no disrespect to Abby Lewis either, one-time television host, son of Stephen Lewis, a well-regarded Democrat. I mean, I don't think Abby's going to inspire the hearts of enough New Democrats to win. So who knows? It's really tough for them.
Another leadership race will be getting underway very soon. We had a conversation with Elizabeth May earlier in the week. Asked her if it's going to stick this time, and she really wasn't committal to the whole thing. She said that they want to have a vigorous search and a national convention with lots of media attention to come up with a new leader. What's the future for the Green Party after Elizabeth, if it does in fact stick this time after Elizabeth May?
What would be more boring than a Jets-Browns game these days? Maybe Patriots and, Jacksonville. Again, we've seen it in Nova Scotia. We've seen it, in PEI. We've seen it in New Brunswick. I think there's pockets of Greens there. But in the case of both parties, you either, Elizabeth raised the profile of the party, like her or don't like her. She's charismatic. She has an audience, and she at least got them on the map. She got them in a couple of debates. So unless either a strong leader that has a public following already comes along for the Greens, like the NDP, and or they change the way they try and run, be more strategic, run in 12, 13 seats nationally, get party status, have a slower build, they're going to have challenges.
Tim, a pleasure, sir. Enjoy the weekend, and we'll chat next week.
All right, take care, buddy. Bye.
That is Tim Powers, our good friend from Summa Strategies and Abacus Data. When we come back, the RCMP reminding Nova Scotians, be careful on the roads and online as the school year gets underway. Conversation with Public Information Officer with the RCMP, Corporal Carlie McCann, when we return. This is the Todd Veinotte Show, back in minutes.
Thanks.
Welcome back to the Todd Veinotte Show. I'm Dan Alstrand. Always a pleasure to welcome our next guest to the air. Public Information Officer with the RCMP is Corporal Carlie McCann. Corporal McCann, happy Friday.
Good morning. Happy Friday to you and to all the students around Nova Scotia who are back to school this week and probably excited to start the first weekend of the school year.
Right. Can't wait for Friday so they can get back to the weekend, right?
Yes. Exactly.
We've been focusing a bit on this throughout the week because it's an important time, and I don't think we can be safe enough out there and offering reminders to particularly drivers who may have become a little complacent over the summer, dealing with some of the rules surrounding school zones and school buses.
Yeah.
And I know it was and it shouldn't have been because I've been talking about it for a week, but it was a bit of a shocker to see the big yellow buses out on the road on my way home yesterday. So, Corporal McCann, a little bit of discussion surrounding school zones there. We talked about it yesterday. There are some speed reductions in there, and if you're naughty and you break those things, you could face a fairly significant fine.
There can be, yes, fairly significant fines associated to, of course, driving with excessive speed in school zones when they're marked. So especially at this time of the year when everyone is getting into these new routines and maybe not used to remembering about the school zone speeds. It's especially important to have your full attention on the road when you're heading into work. Even going 1 to 15 kilometers per hour over the speed limit in a school zone, you may get a fine of over $300. It can also result in points off your license. If you start getting into more significant speeds, such as more than 31 kilometers an hour over the speed limit, it's a fine of almost $700 and 4 points off your license. It's really important because we don't want people to be getting those fines. But the bigger issue associated to this is school kids' safety. When we have people speeding and not following those speed limits in the school zones, yes, you might get a fine, but you might also put kids in danger.
School buses, as I mentioned, out on the road, sometimes we forget the rules when we haven't seen them for a while. We get reports of this every year that people blow by the flashing red lights and the stop signs, and that is extremely dangerous.
It is. And it's the same kind of issue. Yes, you could get a fine or points off your license if you blow by a school bus and don't follow the stop sign on the bus there. But the bigger issue, again, with that is that when the school bus is stopped and has those lights flashing and the stop sign out, it usually means that there's going to be kids on the road or on the shoulder of the road. It can be very much a safety concern for kids, parents who may be with them, to have people not following the signs on the buses. Unfortunately, yes, every year the RCMP does receive calls about people not following those signs and not following those directions from buses. It's very important to keep your eyes on the road, pay attention to all of that, and give yourself some extra time, especially in the first few weeks of the school year, to get where you're going.
Talking a little bit about the older students and the late high schoolers and the university students, I was having a chat with one of my neighbors just the other day who said that their kid's newly licensed and would be driving to school for the first time this year, and it was yet another stress for parents dealing with back to school. What kind of reminders can we pass along to newly licensed drivers that may be driving to school for the first time?
Yeah, what an exciting time for kids who are finally able to drive to school for the first time, right? It's such a big deal to be able to take your car.
I remember it. I remember showing up and having the tunes cranked and the windows rolled down, right?
I remember my grandma lent me her car to drive to school when I first got my license. So not quite as cool and exciting to drive my grandma's car, but still pretty fun. One of the things, unfortunately, that can come with that sometimes is that excitement and that new feeling of being able to drive to school means that sometimes kids forget that they need to have seatbelts for everyone in the car. So if you are planning on driving your friends to school, or if you're planning on, taking your friends out for lunch, it's important to remember that everyone in the car needs to have a seatbelt on. You also have to confirm that you're following the restrictions of your license if you are on the graduated licensing system. So check to make sure that you're not going to be in violation of any of those rules before you're having any friends in your car with you. That's an important message that parents might need to remind their kids of if they're driving to school for the first time.
And the last thing, and I think I mentioned this earlier in the week, that when I was a student going back to school, we were still writing on stone tablets, so this didn't exist. But now there's a whole bunch of different dangers out there with regards to social media and intimate images, and a good reminder this time of the year to be on the lookout for these kind of traps.
Yes. The start of the new school year often means that kids are being exposed to and learning about new technologies and having access to new technologies. That can mean, tablets or computers or other or new connection systems that they're using to stay in touch, whether that's, Snapchat or Instagram and things like that. So it's important at this time of year, and it's a good opportunity to remind kids about what kind of safety things they need to consider when they're online. If you get a friend request from someone you don't know, is that a friend request you should accept? And is that someone you should be talking to online? If someone that you maybe do know or don't know requests an image or some kind of a communication that you're uncomfortable with, whether that's intimate images or whether that's a request to share personal information, parents should talk to their kids about who they can talk to and who they can go to talk about safety issues that might come from the internet. Having an open conversation and that dialogue with your kids before these issues come up can certainly help with prevention. I know that most parents, as well as the police, our goal is not necessarily to get kids in trouble. Our goal is to figure out how we can keep kids safe on the internet. So if we have conversation in advance about what to do, if you get a friend request you don't like, what to do, if you've shared information maybe that you shouldn't have, what to do, if someone makes a request of you on the internet that makes you uncomfortable, having a conversation in advance so students know and kids know that they can talk to their parents or teachers, or they can reach out to places like the Canadian Centre for Child Protection or Kids Help Phone. Those are really important to have an idea of prevention rather than investigating or dealing with something after the fact.
Valuable information. Carlie, I appreciate your time.
Thank you very much, and I hope that this is a safe and happy school year for students across Nova Scotia.
That is Corporal Carlie McCann of the RCMP as we get through the first bit of the first week of back to school. I know it'll be we're back at it on Monday, but it's certainly a lot of really good information to keep in mind moving forward. We're going to stop. Blake is going to update us on what's going on in the news. On the other side of it, we're going to throw open the telephone lines, the Friday free-for-all. It's your opportunity to talk about whatever it is that you'd like to discuss. This is a chance to wrap up some of the conversations from earlier in the week, something you heard, something you didn't hear. You get to guide the conversation. I'll try and keep my comments to a minimum with a heavy emphasis on the try. 902-405-6000, 902-405-6000, or 1-877-801-8255. Friday Free for All. After the news.
Acts.
Welcome back to the Todd Veinotte Show. I'm Dan Ahlstrand. This is the fabulous Friday edition of the program. That means it's time for the Friday Free-for-All, your chance to talk about whatever it is that's on your mind. Something you heard earlier this week, didn't get a chance to talk about something you didn't hear this past week and wanted to get out and get some attention to it. It's your chance to lead the conversation. 902-405-6000, 902-405-6000. There's a lot to talk about. Oh, my goodness, right? We have a 4.1% increase in power rates next year and then again in 27. We chatted about the mayor's code of conduct investigation that's underway. I had a bit of a tirade or a rant yesterday on affordable housing after numbers came out showing that there's 8,000 people that are on the waiting list now for public housing in Nova Scotia. And that spurred an email I got overnight, and I'd like to read it, and then I'll turn it over to you. It comes from somebody that has asked for me to let them remain anonymous, and we will respect that. It says, responding to your call-in hour yesterday about affordable housing. I'm not sure what the magic number is, but I know in an ideal world, housing is supposed to cost 30% of your take-home pay. I work for the city. I make a fairly good income. If and when the rent cap is removed and my rent goes up to what my landlord wants to charge, my rent will be about 60% of my take-home income. Let that sink in. 60%. The writer says, my building is older. It's a 1970s era apartment. I could not afford a new apartment right now. The situation also worries me because I am a single person living alone. I don't share my expenses with anyone else. Everything comes out of my one paycheck. I would actually love to see tiny home communities give single people and couples small affordable options for home purchases. Affordable housing means different things to different people, and we need options. Unfortunately, only our current options are expensive, privately owned apartment buildings. I thought that was rather poignant, and I wanted to share that with you. 902-405-6000, 902-405-6000. We begin the open hour with David. David, how are you?
Hi, Dan. Yeah, doing pretty good. This is something that doesn't happen very often, but I actually support Pierre Poilievre and his stance on temporary foreign migrant workers. So it's important to understand that this is sort of something completely different from sort of immigration or refugees or any of that kind of thing. It's basically an economic measure that's supposed to address critical labor shortages within the Canadian economy, but too often, pretty much what it means is that they can't find Canadians willing to do the job for minimum wage, especially in low-wage sectors like the service sector. So it basically amounts to a wage ceiling, a point where wages can't rise above just because you have an unlimited supply of cheap foreign labor. And so, I mean, obviously it's bad for workers and equity and stuff, but it's also really bad for the economy because it essentially circumvents the laws of supply and demand, which, in and of themselves, price increases aren't a bad thing. if you're struggling to pay your grocery bill and the price of grocery goes up.
Price increases are a bad thing, David. A massively bad thing.
Let me finish, please, Dad.
Sure.
But no, like it's sort of like rain or sun. You know what I mean? It's just it's something that you need. So anyway, the point is, a price increases signals a relative shortage. So yeah, the increasing price of groceries is bad for that individual person paying for it, but it sends a signal to the economy that there are fewer groceries than what we actually need. Less increase in the supply of groceries. And over time, you see those increases softening and, prices level out and stuff like that. So it's the same with labor, the price of labor or wages, that if your wages are frozen in a particular industry, what signal is being sent to sort of young workers or new workers to enter that field to sort of say like, oh, hey, I want to go become a cook and I want to go to college for 2 years because, their wages for cooks are going up and it seems like an exciting field to work in. So over time, what that means is that there's just less and less people available to that job because fewer and fewer people are sort of entering that field or entering, to get the training to enter that field. So, in the long term, that means, well, you have no trained cooks who can one day work in hospitals or work in nursing homes where, safety is sort of critical, very critical, but also means they're not developing the skills to one day own restaurants or businesses of their own. So that sort of leaves us to the mercy of corporations who are all too happy to sort of step in and fill those things. And like groceries, for instance. So we've seen that the independent grocers like Gateway Market are much cheaper, much better, cater to the needs of the people that shop there. And, versus sort of the large grocery chains where prices are much higher and stuff like that. Well, that's why we need people, for instance, to be cooks and stuff, that they develop those skills and then they can take those to the market and, all the benefits that go with it kind of thing. But the other is just also health and safety as well, too. I mean, if you're a temporary foreign migrant worker, you come here to work for that company and you actually pay money. So if that job doesn't work out, you go home out of pocket. So, I mean, are you going to complain about sort of abuse or dangerous working conditions?
I get it.
Or anything like that?
I get the exploitation angle. I really do. Yep.
Yeah, and so that makes it hard for sort of a Canadian, quote unquote, who works there to then be the sole person advocating for that stuff when everybody else is just, perfectly happy to keep their mouth shut and stuff
David,
like that. So,
what do you say to the rural employer, the person that doesn't have a massive pool of younger workers who are willing to relocate to Victoria County to work for an $18, $19, $20 an hour job?
Well, I mean, that's sort of one thing because, I mean, there are a lot of young people that would love to move to the countryside and live a rural life.
But there's nowhere to live. Like, that's the problem.
So, but that's the point I'm going to make. So, I mean, that everybody loves the free market until it doesn't work for them. So it's not that the free market is always kind and nice and stuff like that, but it's sort of, in the long run, it's the best for everybody because it gives you the best chance of success. And sort of you can flip that coin or take the inverse anyway and say, what about a situation where no one can fail? Well, what it would take to maintain that means that also nobody could succeed. So, I mean, it's sad if a farm has to go out of business because, they just can't find the people to pick the crops and stuff like that, and they can't sort of operate that business properly. But in the long run, it doesn't mean that there's no one who could do that. So what incentive is there to innovate, to find new ways to maybe meet the current tastes of people rather than serving, what they were, years past when that business was profitable? And that kind of thing. So, I mean, you're also limiting the opportunities for growth within, say, the agricultural sector that, somebody might come along and find a new way of doing that. Or, maybe the massive industrial farm will disappear, but you can have sort of more market gardeners and, smaller pieces of land, but sort of higher value produce, and perhaps that being a way for young people to enter the business. But, I mean, more than that, it's not always just about the economic benefits, like how much money, the economy generates or something. Work is also about satisfaction and fulfillment. So, I mean, one reason to farm is that farming can be a really rewarding life. My sort of hobby is fixing, vintage electronic equipment and stuff like that. You used to have, you used to be able to make a good wage doing that job, where that's completely disappeared. But beyond the wage, it's sort of, there's virtue in that work. You have to think, you have to innovate,
Virtue doesn't pay the bills, though, David. It really doesn't.
No, but it does make life worthwhile. So, I mean, and that's the thing. But again, you're talking about, on the flip side that if you suppress wages, well, that also just means that people who work in those industries can't survive either. So it's sort of, you need the pricing signals for the economy to be able to sort of adjust itself and allocate resources where they're the most efficient. So at any moment in time, it might mean pain, but in the long run, it means your economy is going to be sort of the most efficient and possible. And that's, just to sum up, that's actually sort of why free market versus, say, command economies like communism is much better. The problem with communism wasn't that people didn't have an incentive to work. They really did. They believed in the revolution and they were willing to sacrifice and work hard for it. But the economy didn't have the pricing signals, so it couldn't regulate itself efficiently. So you have situations where you're producing too many color TVs, but not enough work boots, and just sort of the whole system itself becomes a massive burden and eventually collapses.
All right, Dave, going to move on, man. I got lots of calls.
Right on. Thanks, Dan.
902-405-6000, 902-405-6000. David is certainly has some points, but there's an awful lot of perfect worlds in there, and I don't know if we live in a perfect world, let us say. Let's carry on the conversation. Where are we going here? We're going to Dave. Dave, how are you?
Yeah, I'm well. How are you doing today, Dan?
Good. What's on your mind, sir?
I heard you talking earlier on, about the NDP race,
right.
The leadership race, and I would agree with the comments that's of really little, no one's getting super excited about that. However, I think one of the stories that within that, as I saw the article on CTV, that was a little bit mind blowing to me was, in order to be considered as a candidate,
right?
Obviously you got to be an NDP. It's $100,000. That's very common. No problems there. You got to get 500 party member signatures, and then, quote, at least 50% of the total required signatures must come from members who do not identify as a cis man.
Yeah, I saw that too.
That's crazy. That's crazy.
It certainly will limit the pool of people that will put their name forward.
Well, I don't think that's the issue. I think the issue
I think it is. I think that it's going to limit the people that want to take part in that.
Well, yeah, but aren't you kind of outraged that this kind of discriminatory? Let's make it non-cis men and name any other category of people. If you did that with any other gender, with any other racial group,
right?
My goodness, you'd be hung on the end of the street corner. But to me, this is just again, it shows you just where the NDP's at. And personally, I hope it's a bit of a signal towards the end of the NDP, because they really messed up last election and that season under their leadership then, Mr. Singh. But now, this clearly points to a direction they're going in, and also, what is the most important thing to them, and it's identity politics, and that's crazy talk, because we've got a country of 40 million people, and everybody should be welcome in this country, but to pick out some very much minority groups, again, not talking down to those groups and not saying they don't have a voice, but you can't play this kind of identity politics without I think without it reflecting poorly on your party and without repercussions at the polls.
I think it will. I think it will reflect poorly on the party, and I think, as I said earlier, it's going to limit the number of people that want to take part. If you want to have a broad discussion about where the NDP needs to go, they're almost non-existent now. By putting some kind of a caveat on how you can get signatures, it's going to limit that pool by far.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, so again, I was really shocked to see that. I thought, man, there's a twist.
Dave, have a good weekend, sir.
Thanks, you too, man.
902-405-6000, 902-405-6000. The Friday Free For All continues on the other side of the break. This is the Todd Veinotte Show. We're back in minutes. Welcome back to the Todd Veinotte Show. It is the fabulous Friday edition of the program, and the free-for-all continues. The telephone number is 902-405-6000. It's 902-405-6000. We welcome Nicole to the program. Nicole, how are you?
I'm doing well, Dan. How are you?
I am well. Twice in 1 week. I'm privileged.
Well, I figured since you started the week with Minister Maguire enthusiastically talking about chicken nuggets.
And that he doesn't like broccoli. Let's not forget there. No, cauliflower. Sorry, cauliflower.
That's right. Well, we're going to talk about what that was actually covering, and the fact that he doesn't want to talk about the policy code of conduct that went into effect September 1st. Now, I've called in several times about this policy code of conduct that that entered public consultation in October of 2024. And when that initial public consultation came to my attention, I immediately noticed that sexual abuse, sexual harassment, and sexual misconduct were removed as part of the disciplinary functions of that policy code of conduct. And those items, along with 16 others, are specifically enumerated inside of the Education Act. And the purpose of the policy code of conduct is to give context and definition specifically to unacceptable behaviors. It's an exhaustive list. It exists there. So I started putting a lot of pressure on the minister's office, and I served the Department of Education along with 18 other respondents who are all listed as consultative authorities on this particular process. Like, what are you guys doing? You absolutely, why? Who in their right mind would remove sexual abuse, sexual misconduct, and sexual harassment protections from children? And so what happened was it appeared that the revision was pushed forward by a few months, and by February, any information and any trace of them removing that information has been wiped from all websites, all databases. You can't find it. I've downloaded it all. I have it all. It's well documented. But then come April 1st, they ended up putting out what was considered the approved policy code of conduct. Now, they quietly put those back in, thank God. But what they also did was add 5 additional categories that are not enumerated inside of the unacceptable behaviors. Now, where this becomes an issue is that in coordination with adding these, they also have implemented a student information system, and it is a mandatory incident and behavioral logging system, which means at this point, anything that these students are doing that could be considered unacceptable is getting logged in this system, and there's a lot of gray area around what gets put in, why it gets put in, if it can be challenged, if it can be deleted, and it becomes almost like a juvenile record that will transfer with children from kindergarten right through to grade 12. So I reached out to them again, 18 respondents. And I've been met with nothing but silence on, like, we need some clarification on what's happening here, because if you have things that are outside of the policy code or outside of the Education Act, and you're asking teachers and administrators to do this, we have some serious legal gray area here as to whether or not they actually have the legal authority and the statutory authority to do this. And because I was met with silence, the next thing that you do when these bodies are not responding is you must bring it to the Office of the Ombudsman. So when I bring it to the Office of the Ombudsman, this is when I find out that the policy team inside of the Department of Education has put a gag order on everybody when it comes to talking about this. Full stop gag order. No one is allowed to talk to me. No one is allowed to respond to me. These are the minister, the deputy minister, the assistant to the minister, the heads of the teachers union, the government union, the administrators union, and the executives of every regional center for education across the province under a full gag order. So that's crazy. And then what else came out? Right, that's absolutely insane. So it's not that they're saying I'm wrong. It's not that they're providing the information that any of this is incorrect.
Well,
and
they're public officials, right? They should have to respond to public questions.
Oh, Dan, it gets much better. They should absolutely have to respond. Now, no one can still say that this is incorrect. One of my biggest questions regarding the teachers union is, did the union representatives, by not only consulting on this and participating, but approving it and now giving it to teachers to implement, did they breach the duty of fair representation? Because when you're in a union, they are your representative. They are your legal representative. You technically cannot go hire a lawyer to represent you unless they have breached duty of fair representation. Again, crickets, gag order. So the Office of the Ombudsman cannot prove that this is in line with the law. They've not been able to provide any statutory documents to say that, yes, the policy matches the Education Act. In fact, what they asked me to do was petition my MLA, who happens to also be the minister or the assistant to the Minister of Education, who is under the gag order, who will not speak to me. They asked me to petition him to have the Education Act changed to fit the policy, which is probably the most explosive thing I've ever heard.
Right.
So then I pushed them again, and I kept pushing them because there's absolutely no way a legal oversight body should be telling the public to have the laws changed to fit a policy. Then the response they came back with was, after escalating it to Christine Brennan, who is the appointed ombudsman, and her deputy, John House. Mm-hmm. Then they came back and said, the minister will look at this once there's an aggrieved party, which means a child must get harmed under this policy before anyone's even going to look at it, and we actually can't weigh in on it until it goes into effect in the 25-26 school year. So it was approved and enforced, or approved as of April 1st, sat in the approval until September 1st when it went into force and effect, but they won't even consider adjudicating it until September 1st. And even then, the minister's office isn't going to even look at any of this until a child gets hurt. This is the absolute very definition of willful negligence. And what has been absolutely insane to me is that I can't get a media group to look at this. I can't get advocate groups to look at this. No one in the province of Nova Scotia is looking at this.
Nicole,
and I think
we're just about out of time, and I appreciate you sharing this with us. I truly do. Would this be something that the Auditor General would look at?
The Auditor General has been copied on all of this. The Auditor General, the Ombudsman, everyone has eyes on this. It's at the point right now where I have actually taken it and had to put it into the hands of a U.S. nonprofit who is now collating all of the documents in all of their own words so that this can be released publicly, because no one in the province of Nova Scotia will take it.
Keep us in the loop, will you, Nicole?
I will do that.
Thank you very much. Have a good weekend. 902-405-6000. It's 902-405-6000 or 1-877-801-8255. The Friday Free-for-All continues after the news. All right, welcome to the second half of the Friday Free-for-All. This is the Todd Veinotte Show. I'm Dan Ahlstrand. It is the fabulous Friday edition of the program. Telephone lines are open. There's a couple of lines available for you right now if you want to get on. 902-405-6000. That's 902-405-6000 or 1-877-801-8255. This is the opportunity to talk about whatever it is on your mind, something you heard earlier this week that you'd like to discuss, some of the things that we've already discussed in this part of the show, or something that you'd like to bring to our attention. It's a perfect opportunity. It's a good idea to get it off your chest as we head into a weekend, because weekends are fantastic, are they not? 902-405-6000 is the number, 902-405-6000. We begin with Noah. Noah, how are you?
Good, yourself?
I'm not too bad. What's on your mind?
Well, actually, I realized, and it's happened more so in the States than here in Canada, but the sport of candlepin bowling has significantly been on the decline.
Okay.
For quite some time. The only way to keep it or even make it grow again is for like this current generation to get into it. Because what's happening is the alleys are closing, and I get it's good to build apartments and whatnot because of the homeless population and all that. But at the same time, for those that love to bowl, such as myself, it's kind of sad because the more alleys that are open, the more tournaments that can happen. So it's almost like a 50-50 win-lose situation. Because at the same, like, really, if you think about it, the more that the clothes and the more apartments and stuff I can get built, which is good, and maybe the price of rent can come down eventually, which will be nice.
Right.
But again, that's also some jobs that are being lost.
No, how many alleys are available now? I haven't bowled for years, so I don't even know how many are out there.
In HRM, there's Bedford Chapel Super Bowl, Center Bowlerama, Woodside Bowlerama, and Bear Road.
Are they busy?
For big play, yes. And honestly, I'm not 100% sure about the rest of the time.
Right.
And I know for a fact, in summer, Sackville is quite dead.
Right. Right.
Like, you can go in there almost any time of day in the summer and get a lane. That's how slow it is in Sackville.
Right.
I mean,
but is there? I guess my next question is there? Would there be demand to build more alleys if we did go down that road?
Honestly, I'm not 100% sure.
Right.
Because even sure it's good for people to get jobs and whatnot, but how many people are actually going to want to work inside the bowling alley?
Right.
So it's almost like a win-lose situation all at once.
For sure.
Sure, it's beautiful and it's a great job, but the downfall of that is when will it affect the homeless population or not? So no matter how you look at it, I guess it is like a win for a job, but it's a lose at the same time.
No, appreciate your call. Have a good weekend.
You too. Take care of yourself.
902-405-6000, 902-405-6000. Wouldn't it be a shame if we lost bowling alleys? And I know it's a kind of a niche sport, but I mean, I spent a significant amount of time in my youth in a bowling alley. Not a candlepin alley, but a bowling alley. Candlepin was something I was introduced to when I came here. In where I come from, it's mostly 5-pin and 10-pin, but bowling alleys, I don't know if they're the cultural hub that they used to be, but they certainly were in my day. 902-405-6000. Let's welcome Barry to the show. Barry, how are you?
Not too bad. You know, with candlepin bowling, one time I bowled in 97. Someone said that was really impressive, but I actually stunk. First ball gave me a real good shot at a spare, and I missed it, then got it to third, and the whole game went that way. So I told them I got a 97. They said, "That's just, you must have been really hot," but it's just the opposite. I stunk that night. No way I could get it on the second ball. I don't know why, but
right.
I choked.
Right. What's on your mind, Barry?
That guy talking about a capitalist system. There is no capitalist system anymore, and there is no communist system. China buys more Mercedes than anybody else in the world, and they don't drive around in those green khakis. They have $2,000 suits.
Right.
I took economics in high school, and we need at least 3 companies for capitalism to work, for competition to do its thing.
Right.
If you walk to a dry storage at Highliner, you will see all the competition because we produce 90% of it. There isn't a system like that, and Sobeys and Superstore, they have so many stores, so few people, that the prices are never going to be good. They can never bring them down, and they're always going to be expensive, and to increase the price is impossible. And by the way, the United States is the closest to a capitalist nation. You know what the minimum wage in Florida is?
It's like $7 or something, isn't it?
Yeah, that's the point. There is no true system like that. It's someone to think that if we went totally capitalist, it's no better. And these people that come over here, it's a good break for them. Or they come from really bad countries where they're really poor. It's a chance. It helps them, and we're not going to. Our people don't want it. We spoiled, and we spoil people, so that they don't want that kind of job. It used to be good. You'd think a kid, when I was a kid, mow lawns, do all this stuff for extra money. Kids today don't think that way. They just don't. And like I said, the Gateway is great. Well, there's a few of them. If there was a lot of them, and they weren't selling in volume, those prices would disappear. I mean, the only way that Gateway can work is the way it is now, where there's a few of them, and they're putting the amount of product they put through would blow your mind. They have 11 cashiers now.
Yeah, it's quite an operation. Hey, Barry, I appreciate the call. Have a good weekend.
You too.
902-405-6000. It's 902-405-6000. The interesting part about Barry's comments with the grocery stores is that when you have a monopoly or a duopoly and somebody tries to break into the market, then the monopoly or duopoly are normally quite opposed to that and will try to perhaps corner the market, I'll say, to not to you can read into what I'm saying. So it's for a chicken and an egg, right? You have the duopoly, we have the 2 major grocery stores. Somebody comes in here to try to do a third, and if they get too close to the golden goose, then the pressure's on, and they eventually fail. So I would love to see 5, 6, 7, 8 different companies come in here with grocery stores. I really would. Because the three, I mean, there's the two big ones. There's Walmart, there's Costco. But if we saw 4, 5, or 6 different options come into the market, I think that's the way that we see price control around here, or at least price moderation. Because holy smokes, going to the grocery store, I went yesterday. It's just depressing every time I go there. 902-405-6000 is the number. We welcome Robert to the show. Robert, how are you?
Pretty good. Please excuse my hoarse voice. My age is 94.
Okay.
This is one of the more important calls you've received while you're working in place of Todd, because it's an idea for a way to achieve immediate permanent peace in Gaza.
Okay.
I passed it among some of my Muslim friends here in Halifax, and the majority would favor this. And the preface is that all the world is paying attention more and more to Netanyahu and wanting him to stop even temporarily to help the civilian population of Gaza. But I think the attention should be switched from Netanyahu to Hamas. Hamas started the war. Hamas is continuing to fight it using their civilian population as human shields, and therefore they should be required to stop. Within 4 minutes right now, I'll tell you the plan. The plan is simply that Hamas should surrender. It should be called upon to surrender immediately under these simple terms, a plan with 2 parts. The first part is that Hamas should surrender immediately. Their 5 or 10 or 15 or however many thousand troops would lay down their arms and surrender on condition that all of their lives would be spared, including their leaders, under the laws that usually apply to prisoners of war. As long as the lives of all of the current living Israeli hostages would be spared. So all lives spared on both sides, but as prisoners of war on Hamas side. That's the first part. The second part is that then immediately the UN would take over the administration of Gaza, at least temporarily for a year or so. That the UN would take over administration of Gaza, and the results of these 2 measures, Hamas surrendering and the UN taking over, would be threefold. Number 1, all killing in Gaza would immediately stop. Number 2, the borders would be thrown wide open to humanitarian aid, and recovery from malnutrition and starving would immediately start. And thirdly, the stage would be set for planning a 2-stage solution. And that's the basic 2-stage plan, but just at one addition for 30 seconds, and that is that incidentally a successful 2-state solution would require attention to 4 major areas. Number 1, the geographical borders. Number 2, revision of the Palestinian Authority with the removal of corruption and a new democratic constitution. Number 3, the Israeli settlers on the West Bank, those finding themselves, not all of them would, but some of them would find themselves within the borders of the new Palestinian state. They should be required to leave, but with a well-funded just transition, including at least double the value of their properties. And finally, the 4th point with the 2-state solution, an impenetrable UN or other peacekeeping force along all borders to completely prevent cross-border tolerance. But that's the 4 parts of the 2-state solution. But more immediately, the 2 parts of the immediate plan to stop cause an immediate, it could be done in one day. November 11th, 2018, all things were stopped in one day. Everyone laid down their arms. For the first part, Hamas should surrender immediately as prisoners of war, all 10 or 15,000, including their leaders, on condition that their lives would be spared, and all current living Israeli hostages. Those lives would be spared. And the second part, the UN would take over immediately, administrating the Gaza Strip and getting all kinds of humanitarian aid in to counteract the illness and starvation. So those are my points, and hopefully the demand could shift from wanting Hamas to having Netanyahu to stop pursuing a Hamas group that is sworn to obliterate Israel, so he wants to obliterate them. But rather than obliterating them, have them all surrender as prisoners of war, get all the hostages back, have the humanitarian aid come right in. So shift the stress and attention of the world demanding Netanyahu to stop, get Hamas, the cause of it all, to stop. Everything would improve immediately.
Robert, appreciate the call, sir.
Okay, hope this stirs up a lot of conversation.
Let's
and works.
All right, appreciate the call, sir. 902-405-6000. It's 902-405-6000. The open hour continues after the break.
X.
Welcome back to the program. Just a note, Ken sent me an email. We were talking earlier about minimum wage, and I think we were talking about the minimum wage in Florida, and I thought that it was around $7 an hour. That is not the case. It is $13 an hour. And Ken very rightly says in his email, it's a lot better buying power than our current minimum wage because their taxes, I would suppose, are much less than ours, and rates and so on and so forth. So just for the... for accuracy's sake, minimum wage in Florida is not $7 an hour. It is $13 an hour, which is still below what we have. 902-405-6000 is the number. We welcome James to the show. James, how are you?
Fine, thank you. Good morning.
Just
briefly on the ongoing Nova Scotia Power debacle. I won't get into any detail, but if people have time, there's a great article by Tim Bousquet in today's Halifax Examiner, and I know it's a subscription publication, but I think if you're a first-timer, you can get in for a freebie. Anyway, he goes in. It's a story about the owner of a restaurant in Hebbs Cross near Bridgewater, who has filed a formal complaint with the Nova Scotia Energy Board. That's the new UARB, by the way, right. Nova Scotia Energy Board, going into some detail about how Nova Scotia Power overcharged him. It's related to the data breach, or privacy breach, whatever you want to call it, because their smart meters went wonky. Most residential customers were also affected, but he was seriously affected, and he explains in great detail. Bottom line, just one more. I mean, yeah, that privacy breach was significant, and all our social insurance numbers are on the dark web, and et cetera, et cetera. But in addition, they had to estimate the bills because they couldn't read. The meters had gone wonky, and they couldn't read them from headquarters. And even when they sent out meter readers, they had trouble. More details, but I mean, wow, the service is unreliable. They want a huge increase in the rates, and they can't even read the meters and keep track of our consumption properly. I don't know, Royal Commission, something. And I know, yes, it's a private company, but I've said previously, there's lots of legislative ways the government can do something. But at a minimum, we need some kind of inquiry to see what the heck is going on. They have appointed now they set up a new agency, the Independent Energy System Regulator, right, to try to kind of be a adult in the room with Nova Scotia Power. But anyway, to be continued. It's a mess.
James, I appreciate it, sir.
Thanks.
I think, looking at this Nova Scotia file, and I hate to keep coming back to the consumer advocate, but the consumer advocate exists to raise our concerns to Nova Scotia Power during these kind of rate increase hearings, right? It's the consumer advocate's job to do that. But I've heard from several people who suggest the consumer advocate is not very easily accessible. So I think, and I know this might be pie in the sky thinking, but maybe we need, if you're going to have a significant rate increase, let's say, I don't know, above inflation, then shouldn't the utility be required to come to the ratepayers? Hey, I know this is going to be really pie in the sky thinking, but let's have a series of town halls across the province where Nova Scotia Power can have representatives sitting at a table and they can explain to the ratepayer, be it the small industrial or the commercial or, hey, even the residential ratepayer, why they need 4.1%, why they need another 4.1% on top of that in 2027, and take and answer questions from the people that pay the bills. Wild, right? 902-405-6000, 902-405-6000. Matthew, you get the last word this week. What's on your mind?
Hey there.
What's on your mind? You're on the air.
Okay, yeah. I just wanted to raise a little awareness about crosswalk safety when the kids are going and coming and going to school.
Sure.
I noticed some of it in the school year just started up, so people aren't really used to it yet. I get it, but the last thing we need is some tragedy to happen. And in particular, when there's a bus, just like any bus or big vehicle that stops at a crosswalk that, has two lanes, one for the bus and one for the whatever, keep going straight. If a bus stops at a crosswalk, there's a good reason you should also stop at it. You know what I mean?
Right. I hear you.
Because a lot of people just think, oh, whatever. I don't know why, but they don't realize they can't just keep going, even if the light's not on or something like that. Because kids like to run across streets. They're not used to coming back or going back to school yet, and whatever. But I just really want people to slow down, not dart past a bus when it's stopped at a crosswalk, especially when the kids are coming and going to school.
Great points, Matthew. Thank you.
All right, thanks.
That's going to do it for the Friday Free-for-All. Thanks to you all for dialing the numbers and joining the program. You make my day each and every time that you do that. We're going to stop. Blake is going to update us on what's going on in the news at noon. And on the other side of it, we've talked about the temporary foreign workers program. What does that mean to rural Nova Scotia? We'll have a conversation with the general manager out at the Victoria Co-operative Fisheries. And boom, we come back. The Atlantic Chamber of Commerce calling for now a tailored workforce growth strategy in Atlantic Canada. The CEO of the Atlantic Chamber of Commerce, Rhonda Tulk-Lane, will be our guest. You're listening to The Todd Veinotte Show. I'm Dan Alstrand. We're back in minutes.
Facts.
Welcome back to Hour 3 of the Todd Veinotte Show. I'm Dan Alstrand. Hope you're having a fantastic Friday as we roll towards the weekend. It looked like there's a little bit of rain happening out there. I hope that doesn't dampen your plans. We know the rain very badly needed in our part of the world. And it looks like we may have some more rain coming later Saturday into Sunday. Allister Aalders is here this hour to give us the very latest. I just talked to him. He's poring over his charts and maps and models, and he's going to bring us the very latest in the weather for the weekend. That's coming up in about a half an hour, so make sure you stick around. Labor, it certainly has risen to the top of at least of the news agenda this week. Pierre Poilievre was talking about it yesterday, talking about the temporary foreign workers program and eliminating it, saying that it's robbing Canada's younger generation of employment opportunities. Earlier in the week, I saw I saw from the Atlantic Chamber of Commerce. They are appealing for a region-specific strategy to address what they're calling urgent labor and population challenges. In a joint letter coordinated by the Atlantic Chamber, it was sent to the Honorable Lena Metledge-Diab, who's the Minister of Immigration. It says the chambers and boards are calling for an approach that links immigration with domestic attraction and retention efforts to reverse demographic decline, address labor shortages, and build a sustainable workforce. Very pleased to welcome to the program to talk to us about this a little bit is the CEO of the Atlantic Chamber of Commerce, and that is Rhonda Tulk-Lane. Rhonda, how are you?
I'm doing really good on this Friday, Dan. How about you?
It's Friday. It's always good on a Friday, right?
And you're getting some rain and fog, which you need.
Right. Absolutely. We need rain and fog because it's so darn dry here. Rhonda, This is very topical this week because of some of the discussions that are going on provincially and federally with regards to employment and immigration and foreign worker programs. I guess before we get to all of that, what kind of challenges are we facing here? We hear an awful lot of discussion about labor shortages. Is it real, and what sectors are being impacted by it?
Yeah, it's definitely real, and I'll back it up for years. I'll probably go back, 7-8 years for us representing 91 chambers and boards in Atlantic Canada. Access to talent. Qualified talent, I should say. So the qualified talent for our small businesses it's always been in our top 3. When we ask our members, what are your businesses saying? What are their issues? It has been talent. So it's not new. And you're right, we've been talking about labor, but boy, oh boy, it's gotten really complex, and we've got to kind of move through the noise and talk to employers. This is the piece, and this is why we wrote the letter to the minister last week. As you said, we had 47 of our members sign on with us, which shows the strength and that this is a real issue. But we need employers at the table.
Absolutely.
Because they're the end beneficiaries of this, right? So as you say, what is real, what isn't? Are they actually hurting? Well, yep. And if we don't solve it and we don't fix this and get the noise and get the policies right, we're going to see small businesses potentially shut doors because they can't find the talent.
Rhonda, why has this been such a problem for so long in Atlantic Canada? Why are we losing talent to places out west and to other markets in the world? There's so many things we could look at with that question, Dan, and some of it goes back to the nature. So when we look at, again, our message to the minister, and Atlantic Canada is different, and wherever you live in Canada, you could be saying the same thing. You could be in rural, remote Ontario and saying, we're different. Right. So what we've said, right, and we know we're different. We're special in Atlantic Canada. We're pretty darn good in Atlantic Canada, I must say.
Pretty cool.
Yeah.
I don't know. We could be the coolest we are the coolest 4 provinces in Canada. So therefore, you need to talk to us. You need to talk to employers, and we need to look at what's happening here, because a blanket approach, when Ottawa comes out with something blanket, it really is affecting. Let's look at rural, remote tourism communities in Nova Scotia that really do depend on newcomers, because there are no young people there, because that's now another piece, right? And that's what I think the leader of the opposition recently said, the youth unemployment rate has now become an issue. But we really need to make sure we can prove what we're talking about and look at these pockets and areas and the challenges differently, because blanket policies aren't working. They're not working for Atlantic Canada. You need to come sit down at the table and talk to employers so we can figure this out.
And that was some of the discussion we had in the last hour here on the program with regards to Mr. Poilievre and his discussions over the last week on the temporary foreign workers program. In fact, I'm going to be speaking with a business owner in about 10 minutes' time here from Victoria County, who is a rural business owner, who says without that access to that kind of programming, I'm going to have to close my doors.
Exactly. So what we can say, it's real. We're speaking to employers, and they need to be part of the discussion. So we need our elected politicians and bureaucrats to ensure we're talking. And we've got the chambers here. So let us hold focus sessions. Let us bring the employers to the table for you so we can craft policies that make sense. But we'll just back up to what you said, Dan, there with the temporary foreign worker program. There are businesses in Atlantic Canada that need temporary workers. And we got to separate things, because then there are workers that need full-time staff. right? There are other sectors that need full-time staff, full-time employment. There are some that need seasonal, temporary. So I think what we've had is a broken immigration system where employers are just grabbing on and using anything they can to keep their doors open. So we really just need to keep digging a little deeper. And I'm so glad that we're having this conversation. And it's a hard one, but we've got to have it and we've got to fix it.
It certainly is. Has there been, or what are you hoping to hear from the minister now that this letter has gone forth?
Mm-hmm. Of course, one of the requests in our letter was to have a sit-down with her. What we're really hopeful is that she's boots on the ground in Atlantic Canada, right, in Nova Scotia.
In Halifax,
knows, even better, right here in Halifax. Maybe she's listening to us today.
Right.
What we want to say is, and we don't have to educate her on this. This is brilliant, because sometimes we're doing a lot of educating to people that may not understand the difference in Atlantic Canada. So if the minister's listening, or her staff, is that we want to sit down, we want to talk about specific programming that will help small businesses in Atlantic Canada, and it's going to look and feel a little different than it does in downtown, Toronto, or it may look, though, similar to rural Ontario. We can figure this out, but let's sit to the table and have a chat.
What are your business owners telling you about the lowering of the numbers of international students that they have access to? That certainly is affecting this, is it not?
Yeah, again, right? Like this, it's huge when you think about it. So we've just chatted, me and you, quickly, temporary foreign workers and the issues there, permanent full-time staff that our businesses need, and then we have the international students where there's been caps. And again, what is the right setup, and how do we receive international students, because they play such an important role when they come to our colleges and universities. And by the way, we've been working collectively with the Atlantic Colleges Association and the Atlantic Universities to figure this out again, because they're a part of the puzzle. So what we need to figure out is how, when we accept those students, we set them up for success. Just putting, again, a cap doesn't solve it. They're actually helping when they come with the diversity and creative communities. They're also working in small businesses for the hours that they have available. So that's another piece of the puzzle that we've got to figure out. But again, just putting a cap and stopping it, it's going to do more harm than it's going to do good.
Rhonda, we're out of time. I appreciate yours.
Thank you, Dan. Have a good one.
Have a great weekend. That is Rhonda Tulk-Lane. She is the CEO of the Atlantic Chamber of Commerce. When we come back, we're going to continue the discussion surrounding workers, and particularly in this case, temporary foreign workers. The general manager of the cooperative in Nellis Harbor, Nova Scotia, says ending the temporary foreign worker program will hurt rural communities like his. We will be having a discussion with Osborne Burke. Sorry, couldn't see his name there. Osborne Burke is the GM of the Victoria Co-operative Fisheries and the past president of the Nova Scotia Seafood Alliance, and will be your guest when we come back. You're listening to the Todd Veinotte Show. I'm Dan Alstrand. We're back in minutes. All right, welcome back to the Todd Veinotte Show. I'm Dan Alstrand, continuing our focus on employment and workers and worker shortages, and by extension, the Temporary Foreign Workers Program. I came across this article this morning on the CBC's website. It says the general manager of one of Victoria County's largest employers says Pierre Poilievre's call to scrap Canada's temporary foreign workers program shows the federal Conservative leader doesn't understand the struggle that rural communities face in filling positions. Osborne Burke is of Victoria Co-operative Fisheries in Neils Harbor and joins us on the line. How you doing this afternoon, sir?
Very good, Dan. Thank you.
I guess the big question is, how difficult is it? Like, we hear Mr. Poilievre's argument, Osborne, is that the temporary foreign workers program is robbing our youth of employment opportunities. Your company would employ youth if they were available. Am I correct?
Yes, and as I stated today on CBC, our youngest worker with written permission from the parents was 14 years of age. Our oldest was 76. We're in a rural community, as it is across Atlantic Canada. There's limited labor pool. We've gone to the high school, the grades 10, 11, and 12, recruiting. We have some international students from Cape Breton University, and as many locals as we can employ. And what Mr. Poilievre, and not being factual to the general public, in order to be approved for temporary foreign workers, you have to complete an LMIA, which is a labor market assessment. And in that, you have to advertise in 3 different locations for at least minimum of 4 weeks. Any local applications we get, we employ. And we'd prefer not to use the temporary foreign worker program. I'm sure a lot of industry around Atlantic Canada would prefer not to use it. It's very costly. What he hasn't explained to folks is that our cost for application fee for 35 workers is $35,000 non-refundable from the federal government, whether you're approved or not. That doesn't include $35,000 or around $32,000 airfare for 35 workers to come from Mexico and fly into Sydney. Another $7,000 back and forth to the airport with the bus to transport the workers on site. You have the same airfare when they return, and we are responsible to pay their costs of about $2,200 per person for 6 months for their medical coverage while they're here. Those costs add up to probably around $5,000 per person before they work 1 hour. That's not explained. Without our 35 temporary workers, the rest of our workforce in the processing sector in our facility would not have any employment because we wouldn't be able to operate.
Osborne, I'm glad you broke that down first, because it's the argument that I hear over and over again when we talk about this program is that the business owners are just using this because it's cheap labor and they don't have to employ Canadians because it's right. It's a program they can take advantage of. That is, it seems to me, by those figures anyway, it's just not the case.
No, it's not the case. And the other fact is, in Nova Scotia, minimum wage $15.70. Our starting wage is $19 an hour. Contrary to what Mr. Poilievre puts out there with misinformation and misleading the general public and the media, stating cheaper wages. It's not cheaper. Now you add on those $5,000 per person costs on top of that. If we could employ all local people, we'd be very happy. As it is, we have to go out and either buy or rent homes, mobile trailers, whatever we can find to house these individuals when they're here. They do contribute significantly to the community. You take a little community of Neils Harbor here, there's 35 additional people here for 6 months buying groceries, buying supplies, and spending in the community and the local stores as well, if not into Sydney on weekends or when they have a day off to go do some shopping as well. And they work very well with our local workers as well, and they appreciate each other.
Osborne, that's another, and you may have already answered this, but another pushback that I get with regards to the program is that while they're just not paying a good enough wage, but you're paying above minimum wage and still can't get locals to come to work for you.
Absolutely. Every local that applied was employed. So if anyone wants to work, and my challenge to Mr. Pierre is, come down to Atlantic Canada if you want to know reality. But this is a man who's lived off the government for his entire working career. He's never worked in business, never worked in industry. Go out into the reality of Atlantic Canada, and when you look at Atlantic Canada, we've got about 10,000 temporary foreign workers employed in the seafood industry. It amounts to about 50% of the workforce. And in Atlantic Canada seafood, $6.2 billion in 2022. Nova Scotia last year exports $2.6 billion. And another factor is the seasonal industry, and that's fisheries, forestry, farming, tourism, contributes 50% of the regional GDP in this area. And those are facts and factual statements I'm making as far as the need. We're in a rural community, as I said. Youngest 14, oldest 76. The only 12 we didn't employ are the ones in the seniors manor here, and they're primarily in wheelchairs and walkers and very difficult to spend 10 or 12 hours down there working in a processing facility. And I don't say that lightly, but anyone that can work is employed. They're not here. And in most of Labour Canada, rural Canada, we don't have large labor pool. We don't have public transit for people. We had some students that were traveling from Sydney every day, 2 hours and 20 minutes, and then return after a 10-hour, 12-hour shift to come down here to work where they could. The workforce is just not here. So I'd like to see Mr. Poilievre come down. I want to see all these young people that are unemployed. I want to see them. Hey, next spring, tell them to bring me 35 and I won't bother with the temporary foreign worker program. But he can't because they're not here.
Osborne, bottom line, I know we're just about out of time, and I know you're a busy fella. Bottom line, if the temporary foreign worker program tomorrow ends, what happens to your business?
It would be a disaster in Atlantic Canada. And like I said, not just fishery, forestry, farming, tourism, and it would destroy the economy of Atlantic Canada because we need those workers. And people have to understand, whether it's farming, fishery, in a peak period of 5 or 6 months, we have a lot of volume of product being landed. You need to process that. We don't want to ship it off somewhere else. We want to process it and do value-added production to it and add more value to Nova Scotia. And without those workers, we wouldn't be able to do that. It would be a crisis beyond proportions of even thinking about what situation we'd be in, as well as farmers. And then, again, Mr. Poilievre alludes to a program for agriculture. Well, if he did his homework, there is already a separate program for agriculture where they can bring the workers in. They don't have to apply for LMIAs. There's a current program. We've been working with agriculture industry in the last number of years and with the federal government for a whole new temporary foreign worker stream that would be applicable to agri-foods, meaning agriculture and seafood. And we desperately need that. It's a tool in the toolkit for us to use. And if we can get more local workers, we need less temporary workers.
Mr. Burke, I know you're busy. Appreciate your time, sir.
Thank you very much.
That is Osborne Burke. He is of the Victoria Co-operative Fisheries up there in Neils Harbor, who says that it's not a fact that we're trying to get cheaper labor. It's that we're just trying to get labor. And there's nobody left. Going to stop and take another break. The show continues on the other side, of course. Blake will be here to update us on what's going on in the news. In the next half hour, we'll have a conversation with Cecil. I'm curious to his thoughts of last night's NFL debacle before the kickoff. Spitting on each other. Is that what the NFL has degraded itself to? And we'll also talk to him about the big series this weekend featuring the Toronto Blue Jays and the New York Yankees in the Bronx. Huge playoff implications attached to that. But immediately after the news, we'll get you the very latest on what's going to happen with the weather this weekend. Our weather specialist, Allister Aalders, will be joining us here on the program. You're listening to The Todd Veinotte Show. I'm Dan Olstrand. We're back in minutes. Welcome back to the Todd Veinotte Show. It is the fabulous Friday edition of the program, and what has now become tradition here on the program after 12:30 is to welcome our good friend and our weather specialist, Allister Aalders, in to take a look at what's going on weather-wise as we roll into the weekend. And I'm looking out the window right now, Allister, and the road's starting to drop a little bit, but it did rain, and it's foggy.
It is very gloomy. I think that's a good word to describe it out there. But the drive-in was very drizzly. Kind of one of those days where it's like the windshield wiper needs to be going constantly, but then if it's going too fast, it's like, no, that's too fast. You can't find that happy medium. But yeah, like you said, the roads are wet, so that means the lawns are wet. We'll even if it's not a whole lot, we'll take it. I mean, because we haven't had a lot of it for sure, and it's nice to see, and more to come later this weekend.
And that's my next question: how much of it are we going to see today? And you had give us a little bit of a peek into the weekend, and we may see a little bit more, like kind of Saturday into Sunday.
Yeah. So when we talked earlier in the week, the models have been shifting around. Mainly because, we have a cold front that's going to move through Saturday night through Sunday and very slowly move offshore Monday. So because it's slowing down, we have the opportunity for that front to draw on more moisture, which is present over the Atlantic. This is the thing about the pattern is, you look at the wide picture, if you will, and the systems are all traveling 2 hours south because the jet stream's in a bit of a dip, and then it's ridging back just 2 hours south, and it's like we could have the potential for so many, at least showery systems, but it's just it's holding them all offshore, unfortunately. But what the front is going to do will slowly move through Saturday night through Sunday and move offshore on Monday, pulling on that Atlantic moisture. So it's not a washout. Saturday, bit of a dull start with clouds and fog, but quite sunny and very warm and humid in the afternoon.
It's humid this morning.
It's very humid out there this morning and even still this afternoon. And we were somewhat spoiled in terms of the humidity in August, where we did have some pretty hot weather, but the month overall wasn't too humid. But this weekend is going to be exceptionally humid until that front clears, later on Monday and into Tuesday. But the main timing for these showers will be as we go through Saturday night, Sunday, and Sunday night. And it's not going to be a washout. These are going to be periods of showers, on and off showers. So it looks like the first opportunity for some more organized showers will be overnight Saturday and into early Sunday morning. Chance of showers throughout the day on Sunday, and then more organized showers likely again Sunday night into Monday, and then tapering off as that front clears out on Monday. And if that lines up as it's expected to, we have the potential for, when you calculate from Saturday night through Monday, 10 to 20 millimeters of rain here in the Halifax area. Now, there is the chance we could see some embedded downpours or thunderstorms, which always...
No thunderstorms.
No thunderstorms, please. Always enhances the rainfall amounts a bit, especially very locally. So we could see some areas that receive higher rainfall amounts, but I would say it's a general 10 to 20 millimeters for Halifax and the Atlantic coast, locally higher if we see a thunderstorm or an embedded downpour. And as you move farther inland, farther, west and north, not as much rain, unfortunately, which we would really like to see down in West Dalhousie, because the last two systems have not produced a lot of rain for them compared to what we've had in HRM and other parts of the province. Still looking like 5 to upwards of 10, possibly 15 millimeters. So, that's better than nothing, but not looking to be as high as what we'll see along the Atlantic coast.
Because the officials yesterday told us that unless Mother Nature helps, this fire is going to burn out of control for some time still.
Well, that's the thing. The fire is so large, and they're building the guards to stop it from spreading, because obviously the weather still has a bit of the upper hand, where we haven't had a lot of rain and the winds are shifting direction. They've been fairly light this week, thankfully, which I think that's good for the crews to be able to, at least try to make some progress and build those fire guards around it. But obviously with changing wind directions and, a lack of rainfall, you do need that rain to move into, really, because these fires, as we've heard from officials, they burn deep into the ground. It might, you might not see necessarily visible flames on all aspects of the fire, but sometimes it's it's still hot well into the ground. So they're really looking for some rain to help them, I think, turn that corner that they desperately want to take. So hopefully, as much as we don't like the muggy weather, especially at this time of year when everything's, we're kind of looking forward to the crisp fall days.
The pumpkin spice lattes.
Oh, yes, of course. Pumpkin everything out there now. But certainly the muggy weather is a benefit to them, because the overall humidity, atmosphere is saturated. The fog that we've been having during the early mornings has been helpful. The drizzle would be helpful, even if it's minimally, and these showers will certainly help. And we do need them, because then high pressure does move back in behind this front as we go through the middle stages of the week. The potential for maybe a few systems later in the week. But as I told you on Wednesday, overall, we're not seeing a large change to the pattern, because even though we're getting these showers and it might be, 10 to 20 millimeters, that's, not too bad. It's still very showery weather that's not going to be falling for hours on end. It's going to be, some rain here, break, rain here, break. We need that widespread, long-lasting rain event, and we're just not in a favorable pattern for that yet.
Speaking of rain events, you were looking at the August numbers earlier today, Allister, and many of us would have said, well, it has to be, close to record-breaking because we never had any rain, but 2 rain events are kind of taking those August numbers and skewing them a bit.
Yeah, because, June was at Stanfield at least, June was the driest on record. July was the 4th driest overall and the driest since 1997. But we had two very localized rain events. One was earlier in the month where, from the Halifax area and northeast, some locations managed to pick up. It was a general, I think, 15 to 30 millimeters, depending on where you were. So not a lot, but it was beneficial. And then near the end of the month, we had, a localized heavy rainfall event where parts of the South Shore into HRM and then parts of the northeastern mainland and Cape Breton received 40 to 50, 60. Shearwater had almost, I believe, 70 millimeters of rain. So obviously that's going to skew those numbers a bit, where August rainfall was technically near average. But when you really look at it, I mean, from two rain events, the month was otherwise really dry. So, I mean, on paper, it was an average rainfall month here in Halifax, but in the grand scheme of things, I mean, it was a really dry month, just a continuation of what we had all summer. I mean, I know that that rain event we did have near the end of August did help somewhat, but obviously, I think you would ask most people, they say, "Oh, it was really dry." I wouldn't be surprised if it was one of the driest on record, but no indication that it even broke the top 10, and that's not official. I'm just going off of what came from Environment Canada to my inbox yesterday, where indeed places like Greenwood had their driest August on record, where they only had 12 millimeters of rain in the entire month.
Tale of two parts of the province, right?
Well, right. It very much shows how localized these rain events can be and were, and obviously just what we've been dealing with all summer, where some of us have been tapping into some of these, very localized rain events. Well, places like, the Annapolis Valley, when you look at, the entire summer, parts of Digby County only had 15 to 30% of their normal rainfall from the beginning of June to the end of August. So, I mean, that's incredibly low. I mean, that's definitely, record breaking for sure. Many places had, some of their driest summer on record. Several locations, St. John, New Brunswick had its driest summer. Greenwood had its third driest, and Charlottetown had its 11th driest. So, I mean, it's been dry across the board, but these localized rainfall events have somewhat tipped the data in different ways, because obviously we've had some beneficial rain here in Halifax, whereas the Valley has really had hardly anything for several months now.
That's why when I see a forecast that says, all of Nova Scotia, this is going to happen, it's like Nova Scotia isn't a really huge place, but the weather is so very different.
The weather varies a lot. I mean, you have so many different microclimates, and it really depends on, where the system is tracking in, which way the winds are blowing. The Annapolis Valley does have what is often referred to as somewhat of a rain shadow effect, where you have South Mountain and then you have North Mountain on the Bay of Fundy. And because that air rises moving over the mountain, it pulls a lot of that moisture out. So then when it comes down the other side of the mountain into the valley, it's often a drier air, so you don't get as much rain. We see this in Cape Breton sometimes too, depending on the wind direction, where the air pushes up over the mountain. One side of the highlands gets a lot of rain or a lot of snow, and the other side gets very little, if any. It's more common, obviously, with larger mountain ranges like, say, the Rocky Mountains out west, but we do see impacts like that.
Mini Chinooks.
Yeah, exactly. But like you said, we see these very localized differences in our patterns, especially at this time of year, just where rainfall is so convective, so local. But throughout the entire year, obviously, depending on what kind of system you're dealing with and all the other factors that come into it, it's not usually just a uniform. All of Nova Scotia will be seeing this.
Right.
There's a lot you have to put into a forecast for the province to ensure it's accurate for all.
Very quickly, we're almost out of time. Allister, there's a disturbance now forming in the Caribbean-ish, off of Africa, I guess, is probably the more accurate description. What's your thoughts as we continue to watch the Atlantic Basin during hurricane season?
Well, we are nearing the peak. The statistical peak is September 10th, so we are almost, to that point, and then it'll be the descent down, but we do know that we have to keep a very close eye on these systems here in our region. because the peak is typically September and October for us. In terms of that system, does look like it will become a named system this weekend. The next name is Gabrielle. I would just caution, whether you're looking at an app on your phone that can go out, say, 2 weeks in advance on a weather model. It's going to be a slow mover. It won't be until, 5 to 7 days from now that it's even approaching the Lesser Antilles if it's still held together. So, we're still a long way.
Be careful with the spaghetti models,
yes,
is what you're saying.
Exactly. The models can go out 14 plus days, some of them, but it's there's no way of really knowing on a single model run. The spaghetti models help in terms of trends, but obviously it still has a lot of time to go before it even reaches, possibly threatens land areas in the Caribbean. And then obviously we need to see where it goes from there towards, does it go through the islands or towards the East Coast? And that's something that's, upwards of 2 weeks away.
Could still end up in New Mexico, this thing. It all depends on what happens, right?
You just never know where the systems might go at this time of year. It all depends on so many different steering mechanisms in the atmosphere. So, obviously keeping a very close eye on it, but I don't think we need to really do much talking about it until
this time next week.
This time next week, we can either, say if we're thinking it might, where it might go, or we might be saying, no, we're all good, right?
And this time next week, Allister will be back in the studio, and he will be able to answer all of those questions with a little bit more data and a week's worth of models and maps to look at.
Refreshing every update. That's how it becomes at this time of year. You're looking at every single one.
There you go. Allister, appreciate your time, man.
Thank you. Have a great weekend.
See you next week. That is Allister Aalders, our weather specialist. When we come back, we'll wrap up the week with a conversation with our good friend Cecil, the Blue Jays, the New York Yankees. A huge series starts tonight. You're listening to the Todd Veinotte Show. I'm Dan Ahlstrand. Back in minutes. Welcome back to the Todd Veinotte Show here on the fabulous Friday edition of the program. I don't know if you saw it last night, but the National Football League kicked off its season with the Philadelphia Eagles raising the banner, but that whole thing being overshadowed by an on-field incident. And the Toronto Blue Jays, New York Yankees, a massive series this weekend in the Bronx as the Jays look to solidify their lead atop the American League East. To put a little bit of a perspective on all this, our good friend Cecil Wright. Cecil, how are you, brother?
Yeah, big series, but I've got to say that Jalen Carter, what he did was inexcusable, but Dak Prescott goaded him into it.
Well, he did. Got away with it. And earlier in the show today, I said like Jalen makes $31 million a year. Prescott makes what, 60? These are multi-million-dollar athletes acting worse than school children.
That's right. And I hope that Dak Prescott, I'm pretty sure that Carter is going to get a suspension of at least a game, maybe even two. And I know it would crush the Cowboys, but Dak Prescott should get a minimum of one game because he spat first. I know this is, he said, she said no. It was on camera, plain to see. So as far as I'm concerned, they both should be disciplined, and let's move on.
This whole spitting thing in professional sports is watch a hockey game. It's constantly they're spitting on the ice and everything else. It's gross.
I don't understand it. Like back in the day, now, of course, we're talking a couple of years ago.
One or two.
We never did that to our opponent. Never.
No.
One reason why is because our coaches taught us to respect our opponent. No matter how we felt about them as individuals, you respect your opponent, you give him good graces on the field, and then you try to take his head off legally.
Within the bounds of the rules, right? That's right, and that's what it's for. It's wild. It continues to sour my look at sports these days because it isn't about the opponent, it isn't about the game, it's about the paycheck, right? And that's what's getting lost in sports these days.
Well, to me, it should be about what about those little kids that are watching at home,
totally,
who aspire to be an NFL player someday. I mean, you know, imagine sitting there watching a game and your mom happens to be watching and she sees that.
Well, I mean, what kind of message does it send, right? Like
well, exactly.
It's awful.
And I'm sure that there is, you know, a kid or two around the world whose parents might forbid them from playing because of stuff like that.
Right. Hopefully we can teach our youth that spitting on each other is not acceptable behavior.
Yeah, it's pretty bad when you have to go to those lengths, isn't it?
Right? It's wild. Anyway, the NFL season, as I understand it, continues. There's a Friday night game, is that right?
Yeah, I think it's in Brazil.
Okay.
The Chiefs and the Chargers, which sounds on paper like it should be a pretty good game.
Yeah.
You know, Patrick Mahomes, you know, and the quarterback for the Chargers, whose name is Casey, but he throws the ball very well.
Right.
But, you know, next week is the week for me.
Okay.
Because Philadelphia plays Kansas City in a Super Bowl rematch.
Uh-oh. Trouble.
Yeah. Yep. Right out of the and there's a possibility that Jalen Carter might not be able to play in that game because of that stupid incident.
Right, and I hope that I hope that this is that it's not just a. We were talking about this earlier. You know, like even if you fine him $50,000, if you fine him $100,000, he makes $31 million a year. That's pizza money, right? So, like, it needs to be something significant because this isn't an isolated incident. We need to clean up sports, period, and we can start with the NFL.
That's right. I agree 100%. And I hope that the players and, you know, every player in the league was watching that game last night.
Right.
So I'm hoping that everybody would have seen what happened and said, you know, we can't afford to let our team down by doing something so foolish. I mean, imagine if they had lost that game because,
right.
You know, the Williams kid scored another touchdown right up the middle where Carter usually is.
Right. And it was closer than most thought anyway. They didn't cover the spread. It was I think the spread was 8.5 points, so they only won by 4.
Yep. That's
Cecil,
right.
Very quickly, we're almost out of time. It is a huge series for the Toronto Blue Jays. It starts tonight in New York against the New York Yankees. Your thoughts on the Jays and the struggles in the bullpen?
Well, you know, both teams are having crappy years as it pertains to the bullpens. Personally, I just want to see them beat the crap out of each other, you know, and the Red Sox just sneak right up on the middle.
I don't think that's going to happen, but anyway.
Well, I don't either, but this is a big series, probably the biggest series for the Blue Jays in how many years now?
Many years. Many years.
Yeah. So I'll have one eye on that, seeing how that's going.
It would be something if the Jays were able to take 3 games out of this series and
stop it.
And they could put the Yankees out to pasture and then focus on the Red Sox.
Yeah, well, they better focus on one game at a time, or else they're going to find themselves 3 games behind the Red Sox.
Cool. Anyway, Ed, you can listen to all those games right here on 95.7 News Radio. Anything going on locally you want to bring up, Cease?
Well, we have Nova Scotia Senior Baseball playoff action just began last night. Dartmouth crushed Halifax 11-1, and they play again on Tuesday night at the Mainland Common, 7:30 start if you want to see some playoff ball.
Cecil, have a fantastic weekend, sir.
All right, bud, you too.
That is Cecil Wright, our resident sports guru, and that's going to do it for yet another week here on the Todd Veinotte Show. My thanks to Vanessa Vandenez on the other side of the glass, who doesn't get near enough credit for what she does every day. It's not just answering the phones, ladies and gentlemen. She keeps me in line. She keeps everybody around here in line. She's our radio station mom, we'll call her. How's that? Anyway, thank you very much to Vanessa on the other side of the glass. Thanks to all of our guests who joined the program and imparted their knowledge upon us. You make my day, as you do when you dial the numbers and join the open hour. We're going to do it again next week. Have a fantastic weekend, everybody. I hope that you're well, you're healthy, and remember, be kind to one another.